They decide to team up with opposition parties to change the rules for their benefit. What the opposition parties are clearly aligned on today is a blatant attempt to give them more opposition days, which means more time for government bills. Not only does this provide less time for government bills, but slows the progress of the parliamentary process. Thank you, Madam.
Statement. The honourable member will still have about 1 minute for questions and comments right after QP. The statements by members, déclaration de députés. The honourable member for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This month we celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the Vancouver 2010 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Canadians welcome the world to Vancouver with glowing hearts to showcase and celebrate Canadian athleticism, talent, and culture. West Vancouver and Whistler hosted a number of Olympic events, including Alex Bilodeau winning Canada's first gold medal on home soil at Cypress Mountain. The Games provided a unique opportunity for the four host First Nations to work together and to work with our communities to reconcile with them. The Games showcased their language, culture, and history on a global scale, providing a model for our country and for future Olympic Games. The Games were also a catalyst for critical improvements to our communities, including the Sea to Sky Highway, the Canada Line, affordable housing, and spurring a green building industry. The Games united our country to celebrate a record number of medals, capped off by the storybook ending of Sidney Crosby's golden goal 10 years ago today. These Games provided memories we will never forget, and I look forward to again hosting the world to Vancouver in 2030 and beyond.
The honourable member for Cloverdale, Langley City.
Madam Speaker, there's one thing I've learned since being elected, and that is what the left says never means what you think it means. When they talk about unity, what they really mean is my way or the highway. When they talk about diversity, they never mean diversity of opinion. When they talk about truth and reconciliation, they have no intention of respecting elected band councils unless it's convenient. Right. When they talk about consultation, what they really mean is, let me tell you what I think. When they say dying with dignity, they only mean euthanasia. Mr. Speaker, Canadians look to this House for compassion, truth, and leadership. In light of this week's debate on Bill C-7, let's ensure that when we say that we are committed to quality palliative care, that we truly mean what we say we mean.
L'honorable député de Vaudreuil.
The honourable member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges.
It's an honour in this House to recognize the good work of the Hudson-based Pure Art Foundation. Founded by Robert and Bridget McKinnon and their incredible boys, the foundation is committed to empowering people and building stronger communities. With initiatives in Peru, Tanzania, and Nepal, the impact of the foundation cannot be understated. On March 5th, their work continues with 68 dedicated and generous people, including 13-year-old Laura Lee, 88-year-old Donna Monroe, and our community's very own Father Demers, departing for Peru. They will pursue the wonderful work of the foundation by building 4 additional homes, starting 2 new medical campaigns with the help of local nurses, enhancing the sewing initiative with the addition of financial literacy programs, and enrolling 300 kids in the school program during their trip. Today, on behalf of all members of my community of Vaudreuil-Soulanges, I'd like to wish them a safe and productive journey and thank them for the work they're doing, bettering the lives of not only those all around the world, but in our community. I wish them all the best. Safe travels, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Victoria.
Madam Speaker, my riding of Victoria is facing a serious housing and homelessness crisis. And too many people are living in precarious housing or worse, finding themselves sleeping on the street. We need to take urgent action to invest in affordable, social, and cooperative housing. We should be taking the lead from community organizations like the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness and the Aboriginal Coalition to End Homelessness, who adopt a housing-first approach. And the role of the Aboriginal Coalition is particularly critical because we know that Indigenous peoples are 8 times more likely to end up homeless. Their work is centered on Indigenous peoples, their lived experience, and perspectives. We need a housing strategy by Indigenous people for Indigenous people. Housing is a human right. In a country as wealthy as Canada, no one should have to go without a safe place to call home.
L'honorable député d'Outremont.
Honourable member for Outremont. It's now been 1 year this week since I was elected as the first female member of Parliament for Outremont. What a huge honor to be able to represent the 100,000 constituents of my riding in this House. The top priority for residents of Outremont and Mile End is protecting the environment. Recently, I met with a number of mothers from the organization Pour Nos Enfants, and they all told me it was important for us to do more in the fight against climate change.
Government has made protecting the environment a top priority. We've committed to reaching net zero by 2050, and we know that the best way to get there is through a price on pollution. Hear, hear. As the mother of a 2-year-old myself, I share the fears of the parents in my riding for whom the #1 concern is the planet we'll be leaving our children. We know we need to do more, and I will join you in that fight against climate change.
The honourable member for Oshawa.
Madam Speaker, given Oshawa's long hockey history, it's not surprising that many families in my riding spend their winter nights and early mornings at the arena. But as much fun as our kids have playing the game they love, no minor hockey team, game, or league exists without the hard-working volunteers that make them possible. Since he was 17 years old, Dave Glazier has spent much of his life giving back to the OCHL, one of the local house league associations in my riding. Like many others in Oshawa, Dave spent his days on the General Motors assembly line during his working career, but his nights and weekends have been spent at the rink. As a coach, a board member, and a tournament convener at the annual Heritage Classic, Dave's love for hockey has shown no bounds, and his volunteer work has been his way of sharing that with young players. Dave will be retiring from his volunteer work with the OCHL come the end of this season, and hockey in Oshawa will not be the same without him. I thank him for the tremendous work he has done for the past 50 years and wish him happy retirement. Thanks, Dave.
The honourable member for Sackville, Preston Chesapeake.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we celebrate Black History Month, I want to recognize the 19 students currently enrolled in Irving Shipyard's Pathways to Shipbuilding for Africa in Nova Scotia. In June of this year, these students will graduate and start their careers as welders of at Halifax Shipyards, and where they will build, of course, the next fleets of the Royal Canadian Navy and the Canadian Coast Guard. This program is a collaboration between Irving Shipbuilding, the Nova Scotia Community College, the government, and community groups like the East Preston Empowerment Academy. This program also creates opportunities for African Nova Scotians to learn a trade and establish long-term career in shipbuilding, an industry where these people were underrepresented. I invite all members of this House to join me in congratulating the 19 students as well as the people that were involved in this special program. Thank you.
The honourable member for Ottawa West Nepean.
Madam Speaker, I rise in this House today to speak about the provincial by-elections held yesterday in Ottawa, Vanier, and Orleans. Voters in both ridings sent a resounding message to Doug Ford and elected 2 strong Liberal community champions in Stephen Blais and Lucille Collard. Stephen and
Lucille led extraordinary campaigns focused on education, healthcare, and the failure of the Conservatives in Ontario. I know that they will proudly represent their communities and the City of Ottawa. And I'm looking forward to getting to work with them to move forward on important files.
Congratulations to Stephen and Lucille and their outstanding team of volunteers on a hard-fought campaign and an impressive victory. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Madam Speaker, National Volunteer Week is still a few weeks away, but it's never too early to appreciate the work and impact volunteers have in our communities. During National Volunteer Week, I'll once again be hosting the 2020 Barrie Innisfil Volunteer Awards on Friday, April 24th at 12:30 in the afternoon. This is the 5th year that Barrie Innisfil residents and organizations will be recognized for their kindness, generosity, and compassion to youth, families, and seniors. Very soon, if they haven't already, residents in Barrie Innisfil will be receiving in their mailboxes a form that they can complete to tell me how volunteerism has impacted their lives. They can also nominate someone they know or an organization doing amazing things to help others in our communities. Nomination forms are also available on my website, johnbroussard.com, or in my Barrie Innisfil office, and they must be received by Friday, April 3rd at 5 p.m. To every volunteer in Barrie Innisfil and across Canada, I say thank you for all that you do to help the most vulnerable in our society.
The honourable member for Milton.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
In community housing with my brother Luke and my mother Beata at Chautauqua Co-op. My mom is the community coordinator at Briarview Co-op, and I join her in championing co-op housing as a solution for poverty and housing insecurity in Canada. This past weekend in Milton, I joined my neighbours for the coldest night of the year walk. Miltonians walked 2, 5, and 10 kilometres in support of Milton Transitional Housing, raising almost $60,000. Mr. Speaker, I want to make special mention of Bob and Mary Walker, the original organisers of this event in Milton. They're both in their 90s now, and they've walked every single year, true champions of this cause. Our government introduced Canada's first ever poverty reduction strategy, and the recent Canadian Income Survey indicates that over 1 million Canadians have been lifted out of poverty since 2015. Collectively, we've achieved Canada's lowest rate of poverty ever. Our plan is working, Madam Speaker, but better is always possible, and I'm thrilled to support that work on behalf of my neighbours and across Canada and Milton.
The honourable member for Kenora.
Madam Speaker, like many of my colleagues, one of my favourite aspects of this career is connecting with people across my riding by door knocking. And during the last campaign, I met a family at the doors in Kenora who have an amazing 5-year-old daughter named Johanna. She's intelligent, she's full of character, and I have no doubt in my mind that she will find a way to accomplish her greatest dreams. But Madam Speaker, Johanna was rendered completely blind from birth. Diagnosed at the age of 4 months, and she has been learning throughout her life of how to deal with the challenges that presents. A simple task such as distinguishing between a harmful cleaning product or a bottle of juice can prove to be a barrier to Johanna's independence. That's why I want to take this opportunity to remind all members of this House that we must do more to ensure that the people like Johanna and the other 1.5 million visually impaired Canadians have a safer and more accessible life. After all, it is up to all of us to work toward building a more inclusive society. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for South Surrey White Rock.
Madam Speaker, I found myself reflective on the promise of Canada, a country few want to leave and many want to call home. I've walked past Shut Down Canada signs and been sworn at in the street by people holding those signs. It's my daughter Donna's birthday today. She's a compassionate law student who fiercely defends the rights of women. What is this Canada she's inheriting? I think on sacrifices of our ancestors, including First Nations, their deprivations, their fierce belief that this is a home worth fighting and dying for, and in modern times that our freedoms in Canada are precious and too easily lost. Freedoms like peaceful protest, the dignity and self-worth that comes from work well done, providing for your family, and the hopeful joy of a new parent. But I confess that I'm worried for my country right now. We're having trouble finding our balance, finding our rhythm. Helping others is a tried and true way to put our own egos aside and do good works from the heart out. Let's all embrace that challenge. Believe in Canada.
The honourable member for Windsor West.
Black History Month is Canadians of African descent going forward guided by the past. But I believe all of us, regardless of our ethnicity, can find inspiration and guidance in the stories of trailblazing African Canadians. People like Windsor resident James L. Dunn, a 19th century black businessman who sued the Windsor Board of Education for his segregationist practices in 1883. He lost the case, but then continued the fight by being elected a school board trustee and desegregated all of Canada's city schools. He went on to be elected a town councillor and continued changing policies from the inside. It is fitting that Windsor's newest school be named after him. But one does not have to look into the past to find inspiration. In my riding of Windsor West, we lost 4 outstanding individuals of African descent in 2019. Daphne Clark, one of the founders of the Windsor Women Working with Immigrant Women. Brian Kersey, longtime labor and human rights activist. Frida Steele, one of Windsor's first black nurses who co-founded the Windsor and District Black Coalition. And Shelley Harding-Smith, Canada's first black female master electrician and a longtime school board trustee and a personal mentor of mine. Let us all learn from their examples.
The honourable member for l'honorable député de Shefford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On March 8th, we will mark International Women's Day. If you follow the news, you know that the battle is not yet won and that the feminist fight will have to continue as long as necessary. So March 8th is a day to express how proud we are to be women, but also to remember that feminist struggles at home and around the world are still relevant. Too many women are still murdered, even in 2020, just because they are women. And there are still far too many cases of gender-based discrimination and violence. Some rights that we used to take for granted are now being threatened. And of course, there are still huge inequalities in terms of the way men and women are treated. Let's speak out on social, political, economic, and cultural issues. We all need to stand in solidarity. Let's stand up for women's rights.
The honourable member for Lethbridge.
On March 8th, we celebrate International Women's Day. We celebrate women from all countries, all ethnicities, and all faiths. We celebrate the fact that all women are valuable and have incredible contributions to make to society. Every woman is full of potential and able to positively impact the world. Every woman deserves equal opportunity to do so. Many women, unfortunately, get up each day, they face discrimination, harassment, and perhaps even violence. This is unacceptable in a country as great as ours. Today, we renew our commitment to creating a world where women and men exist as equals, people of equal value, equal worth, and equal dignity. Today, we celebrate the greatness in each and every one across this country and around the globe. Today, we commit to being her champion. She is strong, she is capable, she is intelligent, she is talented, she is inspiring. She is grandmother, mother, spouse, daughter, sister, niece, friend, coworker. Today, we commit to empowering women everywhere.
The honourable member for Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam.
Madam Speaker, Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam has been a little extra kind lately. From February 9th to 15th, students and teachers in my riding spread the word of committing kind and caring acts. Real acts of caring began at Central Community School in Port Coquitlam in 2005. Students from across the riding have since supported this idea in their schools and around our community. This year, Real Acts of Caring Week again had our community members doing something kind for one another and not expecting anything back. I would like to thank all those who participated and encourage you all to continue caring about being kind.
Very good.
Oral questions. Questions orales. Questions orales. The honourable member for Carleton.
We learned today that in the last 3 months of 2019, our economy ground to a halt with a pathetic 0.3% growth rate. Big declines, again, in business investment in machinery. Last year, the U.S. economy grew almost 50% faster than here in Canada. And by the way, this is all before the impacts of the coronavirus and the illegal blockades. Who knew when you shut down major projects, raise taxes, and wrap business in red tape, the economy stops moving? When will the government realize that a weak leader equals a weak economy?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
With respect, the honourable member seems to be ignoring the enormous success the Canadian economy has experienced over the past number of years. I'll remind him that we are at record low levels of unemployment. We've added more than 1 million new jobs to the Canadian economy, and we have more women working in the Canadian economy than at any point in our history to date. If the honourable member would take a break from running down the Canadian economy, he might actually realize that foreign direct investment is up, more people are working, and we're experiencing an economic growth record that the Conservatives would blush at.
Before it gets any worse, I just want to remind members to hold their comments and questions. There are opportunities to ask questions during question periods, but there's also an opportunity to hear the answer. I would ask that the heckling stop. The honourable member for Carleton.
Well, the member is absolutely right. Conservatives would blush if we were presiding over these terrible numbers, Mr. Speaker. Here we have the economy grinding down to a rate of 0.3%.
Shameful.
A third consecutive quarter where business investment in machinery has collapsed. The economy is grinding to a halt, and that is before even the blockades started to take effect. Madam Speaker, when will the government realize that don't worry, be happy is not an economic plan?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, the honourable member has completely misconstrued the plan that has actually led to over 1 million jobs created in the Canadian economy. I'll remind him of some of the measures we put in place to actually help this development come to be a reality. We've invested by reducing the small business tax from 11 to 9%. We've created a new and more effective regulatory regime that's actually going to help projects move forward more effectively. We have engaged in international trade negotiations and are now the only G7 economy that has a free trade agreement with every other G7 economy. 1 million new jobs, more people working, growth that would make the Conservatives jealous.
L'honorable député de Carleton.
The honourable member for Carleton.
These terrible numbers are before the new illegal blockades took effect. This quarter, we are going to experience the repercussions of illegal protesters blocking the full functioning of our economy, something that the Prime Minister encouraged when he stood in the House of Commons and celebrated them as great defenders of human rights. Madam Speaker, the reality is that this illegal blockade of our economy represents a war on working people. When will the government stand up and fight back?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government has committed to a peaceful resolution to the crisis. Madam Speaker, there has been progress over the past week, and there is now only one blockade on a track around Montreal, and we're working very hard along with the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, who's in British Columbia, to meet with the hereditary chiefs and find a peaceful resolution. Trains have begun running in the Belleville area. That was a very important track, so there has been progress. The honourable member for
Louis Saint-Laurent.
For Louis Saint-Laurent.
Présidente, la réalité des faits, Madame la Présidente, c'est qu'on est dans la 4e semaine de crise majeure pour l'économie canadienne, crise qui a été créée de toutes pièces par l'inertie et le manque de leadership de ce gouvernement-là. C'est ça la réalité. Hier, Madame la Présidente, le ministre des Ressources naturelles du Québec a sonné l'alarme. Le Québec est à...
It appears that there isn't any interpretation. Can you hear the interpretation? You hear it? Yes? I would ask the member to begin again, please.
English, no, I'm joking. Alors, Madame...
And so, Madam Speaker, let's be serious here. It's week 4 of the rail crisis in Canada, and this was created by the inertia on the part of this government that showed terrible, pathetic leadership over the past month. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, the Canadian and Quebec economy are suffering. Yesterday, the Quebec Minister of Natural Resources said we're only a few days away from a serious shortages in the economy. He said we're a few days away from a propane shortage. I'm sorry, that's what happens when you have to start a question over again. In any case, we want to know what the government will do to respond to this very serious concern. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I share the concerns and impatience on the part of Canadians to find a peaceful solution to this. We've wanted to find a peaceful solution from the beginning. We've put a priority on dialogue, and that's also been the priority of our provincial counterparts. Madam Speaker, there's one blockade left. Rail transportation has begun again around Belleville. This was a very important railroad, and it will help in terms of shortages everywhere. The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Well, Madam Speaker, containers have been piling up, ports have been blocked, and trains haven't been moving. Yesterday, the Minister of Transport, who perhaps wanted to reassure the public but didn't manage to, said that it will take months before our economy will get back to normal and before transportation will get back to normal. Is there anyone in this government who could set the record straight for Canadians and tell us when the economy will finally get back to normal after 3 weeks of inertia on the part of this government. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Fully understands the impacts that this blockade and these blockades are having across the country. But I'd like to remind the honourable member that the Minister of Transportation helped and his department facilitate an agreement between CN and CP to get rail traffic going, and that up to 70% of CN's goods were flowing down the tracks. Exaggerating the shortages doesn't benefit Canadians. There is some backup. We hope to get everything back moving, and we're moving in the right direction, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Madam Speaker, from day one, the Bloc has been saying that the Prime Minister has to take charge of the rail crisis. More than 2 weeks ago, on February 13th, the Bloc recommended mediation. For 10 days, we've been saying that the RCMP should withdraw from Wet'suwet'en territory and that pipeline work should be suspended. Now, the government saw the light in the past 48 hours, but the government has totally failed on its management of this crisis despite our proposals. Will someone at least manage this crisis? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations.
Merci, Madame la Presidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you for the question from my colleague.
We've been working around the clock to resolve this issue in a peaceful and lasting way. Our Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations is currently in British Columbia along with her counterpart, BC counterpart in Smithers, to have continued discussions with the Wet'suwet'en Hereditary Chiefs. We are encouraged that all parties have worked together to create the necessary conditions to meet. And I want to quote the Hereditary Chiefs who made it clear to their supporters yesterday, and I quote, "We now need time to have discussions in an atmosphere of respect, and we look forward to those discussions, Madam Speaker."
The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Madam Speaker, that wasn't what I was asking. I was talking about what's going to happen after the crisis, even though it's not over. It's difficult to get the true measure of the cost of this rail crisis because it's not over. And even according to the Minister of Transport, it could take months before train transportation is back to normal. To date, we could easily be talking about billions in losses for our businesses, not to mention losses to the families of workers who have been laid off. Quebec has committed to providing emergency assistance to businesses. Will the government offer financial support to the affected businesses and workers? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Very much, Madam Speaker. As I've said, the government understands the significant impacts that these blockades have had across the country. I know we are working hard to resolve the issues that are outstanding and focusing on negotiation as the best way to solve this in a lasting and meaningful way. And we'll continue to do that. We hope to hear progress from the meetings with the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and look forward to hearing from her from British Columbia.
The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
The Prime Minister's failure of leadership has forced another 1,500 auto workers in Windsor, Essex out of their jobs. Madam Speaker, they've given up on the auto sector. They cancelled the Automotive Investment Fund, they ignored the Auto Czar, and like the Conservatives have refused to bring in a national auto strategy to support the assembly and supply chain. Madam Speaker, what will it take? How many jobs have to be lost? How many communities have to be devastated before the Liberals realize this industry and the Canadians work for it are worth fighting for?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Economic Development and Official Languages.
Merci, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Very much for my honourable member from Windsor West. We're very concerned about jobs and understand the anxiety in the Windsor area. Our government understands that the path to economic prosperity varies from region to region. And as a member from southwestern Ontario, I know how important the auto industry is to the region. I was with the minister just 2 weeks ago when we met with local businesses and the mayor of Windsor, and we are hearing their concerns. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Courtenay Albany.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals promised they were going to move to on-land, closed containment salmon farms on the BC coast by 2025. It was even in the minister's mandate letter. But now they're saying they won't even have a plan until 2025.
How about that?
BC wild salmon and workers can't wait 5 years.
That's right.
The transition needs to get started now to save Pacific wild salmon. The Liberals already know that open net salmon farming is impacting wild salmon stocks. So why are they delaying?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and Canadian Coast Guard.
Madam Speaker, on this issue, I think it's important that we're incredibly clear. When it comes to finfish, open net pen, aquaculture, specific to the BC coast, we are moving forward on our commitment to transition away, completely independent from anything happening on the East Coast. Now, this is a tricky issue. It's going to mean working with the province. It's going to mean working with Indigenous people. It's going to be making sure that we take care of the economic opportunities that coastal communities are depending on. We're going to do that work, Madam Speaker.
Here.
The honourable member for Edmonton Millwoods.
Madam Speaker, the Auditor General yesterday appeared before the Public Accounts Committee and said that his office does not have the financial resources required to fulfill his mandate to properly audit this government. He is forced to conduct fewer audits, and his IT system is completely out of date. He's still running on the old DOS system. Madam Speaker, he has made several unsuccessful requests for more funding. So why is this Prime Minister hampering the Auditor General's office and restricting him from conducting more audits into his government?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, taking a question from the Conservatives on officers of Parliament is like taking a question about the well-being of chickens from Colonel Sanders. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the Office of the Auditor General, I'll point out to the Honourable Member that the Conservatives cut $6.5 million from their budget and removed 60 employees. As part of Budget 2018, during the past Parliament, we committed to investing more than $41 million in additional funding for the Office of the Auditor General. I'll start taking these questions seriously when the Conservatives step up with action, not just words.
Bravo. Just want to remind members that we were doing really well, and I would just ask members to, again, not heckle when you get the answers. The
honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Madam Speaker, the Auditor General opened an investigation into the Liberals' $188 billion infrastructure plan. He said again yesterday he doesn't have sufficient resources to do his work. I asked the Minister of Infrastructure if she would support additional resources to help him in his investigations. The answer was yes. We need to be held accountable. Will the Minister of Finance also be accountable and responsible and provide the Auditor General enough money to do his work? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Speaker, again, I find it rich to take questions on the adequacy of funding to officers of Parliament, given the Conservatives' track record of cutting those resources in order to avoid scrutiny of the government when they were in power. Madam Speaker, in Budget 2018, our government beefed up the funding for the Office of the Auditor General by $41 million, which represents a 16% increase relative to the 2015-2016 fiscal year. When it comes to ensuring that officers of Parliament have the resources they need, we're going to work with them to ensure that they benefit not just our government, but all Canadians.
Bravo. The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, the answers that we've received to those two questions are ridiculous. In 2011, the Auditor General voluntarily participated in the Deficit Reduction Act, and he told the NDP committee chair that he had enough money then to do his job, but now he says he does not. And the main estimates reveal that they've cut $300,000 from the budget. So when will this minister do the right thing and fully fund the Auditor General like the former Liberal co-chair advised in the letter that went to him in June?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
I've already given the detailed answer on both the Conservative cuts to officers of Parliament and the investment that we made in Budget 2018. The fact of the matter remains that we remain committed to supporting the work of the Auditor General and other officers of Parliament. We're going to ensure that they're able to have the tools they need to do their job, to ensure that Canadians benefit from their advice and Parliament can work to its greatest capacity. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Madam Speaker, our country's economy is moving at the speed of freight trains. After more than 23 days of rail blockades, there's been a huge hole in our economy that will be hurting us for a very, very long time. The patience and tolerance of Canadians are not as elastic as that of the Prime Minister's. It has limits. Enough is enough. Madam Speaker, does Canada have a Prime Minister with enough backbone to get Canada's trains moving again?
Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We understand the impacts that these blockades are having across the country, but it's important we proceed with a negotiated settlement of these disputes because we want a lasting settlement. We do not want to see these blockades happening again. The government is engaged in those negotiations, and we're doing what we can to ensure a lasting settlement going forward. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
All week, the Liberals have been spinning Tech's decision to cancel their project as the company's decision. It's the same spin they used when TransCanada cancelled Energy East. The systematic destruction of Canada's energy sector is what the Prime Minister and the Liberals have always wanted. Well, here's the truth. Liberals have politicized the process to the point where these companies and others have decided not to invest further in Canada while these Liberals are in power. Why won't the Liberals stop the spin and acknowledge that billions in lost opportunity and the jobs that go with them lie directly at their feet?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister, to the Prime Minister, Oh, sorry. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a Friday. Let me just state very clearly for members of this House and for all Canadians that our government absolutely understands the importance of natural resources to the Canadian economy, and in particular of the oil and gas sector. Canada is one of the world's leading oil and gas producers, one of the world's leading oil and gas exporters, and that sector provides hundreds of thousands of high-paying jobs, including blue-collar jobs across the country. That's of great value, and that's something our government supports.
The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Also this week, we found out who's really in charge of Canada. As Global News showed us, the Prime Minister is taking his cues from the granola-crunching, Castro-loving, VW bus-driving, anti-resource, anti-government, anti-everything professional protesters with absolutely no connections to First Nations groups. Across the country this week, including Union Station in Toronto, illegal blockades affected not just commuters, but also communities. Why are the Liberals supporting well-funded eco-radicals more than hard-working Canadians and the businesses who employ them?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I understand representing residents who use GO Rail to get to work, to get to Toronto. We understand the impacts that this is having and that rail blockades in the past have had across the country over the last few weeks. We're working hard towards a negotiated peace and a negotiated settlement. The tone by the Conservatives to exaggerate the impact is not appropriate. The tone to call in the army, to order the police is inappropriate, is not helping anything, is only exacerbating the situation.
The honourable member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, use of facial recognition by companies is troubling. Citizens have a right to circulate, go into stores, and to work without being constantly spied on. This raises serious questions about the kind of use companies may make of our biometric data. In Quebec, as well as at the federal level, the legislative framework is not ready for the use of facial recognition, nor for appropriate protection of data that is collected. Will the government order a moratorium on the sale of facial recognition systems to companies? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for her question. This is an important issue. One has to balance privacy with our duty, the RCMP's duty, to protect citizens, and that's why the RCMP will be working with the Privacy Commissioner in order to be able to strike that balance. And more generally speaking, the privacy commissioners in provinces and the federal commissioner will be looking into this. The honourable member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, Clearview AI is a leader in facial recognition, and their services are used by police services. They revealed that they had a data breach. That is our biometric data, Madam Speaker, our personal data. And today, the companies are proposing to sell this type of technology to private businesses in order to target good clients, spy on their behavior, or do profiling. This not only raises serious issues, but it's simply not safe. We mustn't wait any longer. We mustn't wait for there to be a problem. Is the government willing to impose that moratorium?
Science, Innovation and Technology.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Canadians are understandably anxious about how their data is being used in an increasingly digital world. But allow me to assure my colleague that the Privacy Commissioners of Canada, BC, Quebec, and Alberta are jointly investigating whether their organization's practices are in full compliance with Canadian privacy law. As this is an active investigation, no additional details are available at this time. Thank you.
The honourable member for Bow River.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The new CRTC guidelines in the Yale report that the minister is reviewing are deeply flawed. I have strong concerns about the journalists being licensed and registered. I'm also very frustrated about the Yale report recommendation number 4 that would have 9 board members live or move to Ottawa for 7 years. That is discriminatory toward Western Canada, just plain wrong. Madam Speaker, will this government commit to rejecting number 4 of the Yale report, or will this government continue to alienate Western Canada?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Madam Speaker, our government thanks the members of the Yale report for the work that they did. The panel has undertaken a wonderful final report, and we are looking at the recommendations in the report and plan to take action as swiftly as possible. The report recommendations that are proposed are all being considered, and we support a strong, competitive broadcasting media sector. We intend to move swiftly to ensure all players, including web giants, support Canadian culture. We are reviewing them, and we are looking at them right now.
Honourable member for Port Coquitlam.
Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister announced a $600 billion media bailout before the last election. Then he directed his minister to create new regulations that control social media platforms. January's Yale report states accurate, reliable, and trusted news content is in peril, and that the CRTC must be able to monitor and address issues concerning news content regardless of format. The Prime Minister has been priming his way to control what Canadians have to say. Madam Speaker, when will the Prime Minister stop attacking freedom of speech and expression?
Hear, hear. I want to apologize to the member. I said Port Coquitlam. It was Port Moody Coquitlam, so I do want to correct it. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Madam Speaker, our government believes in a strong, free and independent press. The report we received from an independent panel proposes to exempt news media from licensing requirements, and I want to be clear on our intentions. Our government will not impose licensing requirements on news organizations, nor will we regulate news content. Our focus is to ensure Canadians have strong access to diverse, high-quality and credible news.
The honourable member for Bellechasse is Etchemin-Lévis. Madam Speaker, we already knew that the government was ignoring our local radio stations and media, but now we've learned that they're spending 5 times more on web giants than Canadian media. What? $52 million for these foreign giants that don't pay any taxes in this country? Why not invest in Ricardo, for example, that reaches 3.8 million internet users, or the Véronique magazine that reaches 800,000 people? They do pay taxes in this country.
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as my friend from across the way knows, we are reviewing all of the regulations and that we are committed to ensuring that Canadian creators are paid their fair share. That is something that we are continuing to work on, and I look forward to working with a member from across the way as we work on those proposals.
The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Madam Speaker, despite the federal government ignoring the scourge of money laundering, a provincial inquiry into the practice has started in BC. BMW told the inquiry that the lack of port police has allowed a massive increase in illegal exports to China. Wow. This is a huge problem because the federal government has rejected calls to subject luxury car purchases to FinTrack reporting. What? Either these Liberals are ignorant of what's happening in my home province and, despite its distance, still part of this country, or they just don't care, Madam Speaker. Which is it?
Which is it?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Money laundering. Our government put in place a strong regime to make sure that we're watching out for this kind of irresponsible and frankly illegal behavior. We're working with the different provinces so we can highlight the information for beneficial owners. We're going to continue to work with all parties of this House to ensure that we're taking care of Canadians, and I look forward to follow-up conversation with the member to discuss in more detail.
The honourable member for Victoria.
Madam Speaker, the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs have been asking for weeks for a meeting with the Prime Minister. But he just can't seem to find the time. When wealthy and powerful corporations like Enbridge and Suncor ask for a meeting, he doesn't hesitate. Canadians are waiting on the Prime Minister to show some leadership and take real action to de-escalate this situation. So why does the Prime Minister have time for big oil and gas, but not for Indigenous leaders?
I want to apologize. It seems that there was no interpretation during the time of that question. Est-ce que ça fonctionne maintenant? Ça fonctionne maintenant? Est-ce que vous avez manqué la plupart?
Is it working now? Did you miss most of the question? Okay, well, we'll start over.
Madam Speaker, the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs have been asking for weeks for a meeting with the Prime Minister, but he just can't seem to find the time. When wealthy and powerful corporations like Enbridge and Suncor ask for a meeting, he doesn't hesitate. Canadians are waiting on the Prime Minister to show some leadership and take real action to de-escalate this situation. So why does the Prime Minister have time for big oil and gas, but not for Indigenous leaders?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to start off by rejecting the premise of that question. But I do want to reiterate, as we speak right now, our Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations is in British Columbia, along with her BC counterpart, in meetings with the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs. We are encouraged by the recent developments, and we are encouraged that all parties have come together to create the necessary conditions for this meeting. It is a positive first step, and discussions will continue. And as the hereditary chiefs made clear to their supporters yesterday, and I quote, "We now need time to have discussions in an atmosphere of respect." Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. This morning on the radio, our friend Romeo Saganash reminded us that every crisis gives us a chance to achieve great things. Right now, the struggle for Indigenous rights and the climate emergency are converging, but the Prime Minister seems unable to seize the opportunity. What's worse, he doesn't even seem to care. He sends his ministers in to negotiate, but keeps his own distance. Put your feet up. Does he realize he's Prime Minister, that he's the one in charge? Or does he lose interest in being Prime Minister when the going gets tough?
Secretary to the Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do want to, first off, start by acknowledging the tremendous work of our Prime Minister, the leadership he's shown over the past 5 weeks in extreme resolve in order to ensure that we move forward in a manner that respects reconciliation. I know that as I speak right now, our Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations is in British Columbia with her BC counterpart, meeting with the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs. We will continue to engage in a manner that respects Indigenous rights, that ensures that we move forward on the very important work of reconciliation that involves each and every Canadian. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Newmarket, Aurora.
Madam Speaker, I recently met with the Canadian Cancer Society, who told me that 1 in 2 Canadians will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. And although investments in research, early detection, and treatment have resulted in more people surviving cancer than ever before, there is more to be done. Speaker, too many Canadians and too many people in Newmarket, Aurora have been impacted by cancer. Can the Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of Health please tell my constituents what we are doing to prevent and treat this disease, which has touched so many of us?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Merci, Madame. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Newmarket, Aurora, for that question.
He knows someone who has battled cancer. That's why we support prevention and treatment with over $50 million annually to organizations like the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer and cancer research with $150 million from Budget 2019. We're also working to reduce cancer risk factors like unhealthy eating, physical inactivity, and smoking. I want to thank the member for his question, for his work as a new member of the Health Committee, and for his advocacy.
Bravo. Here, here.
The Honourable Member for Prince Albert.
In Saskatchewan and across Canada just can't catch a break this year. Whether it's the weather, illegal rail blockades, a carbon tax, this past year has been a costly one for farmers. And now they don't have the cash flow to put in this year's crop. But the Minister of Agriculture can actually do something. The question is, will she? Will the Minister commit to pushing back the repayment date for the advance payment program to help our farmers get back on their feet?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, we understand the pressure and stress of our farmers are facing following a tough 2019 year. We made changes to the advance payment program last year to help address cash flows issues by increasing the maximum loan limit to $1 million. We have the authority to give farmers more time to repay their loan if an APP administrator requests it and if the situation warrants it. We are in close contact with our third-party program administrators to monitor the evolving needs of the farmers and will duly evaluate and request any stay of default. Thank you.
The honourable member for Dauphin Swan River, Nipawin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Spring is supposed to be a time of hope and renewal for Canadian farmers. Unfortunately, our railways have been shackled by this government due to the lack of action in removing illegal blockades. Farmers are about to experience payment deadlines from creditors next month. With no hope of getting their grain to market, farmers will be hit with an interest rates of approximately 20%. Wow. Our farmers need action, Madam Speaker. When will this government commit to modifying the cash advance program to address this current crisis?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Foods.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question, and as I said before, we understand the pressures and the stress of the 2019 season. We made changes to the advance payment program last year to address cash flows by increasing maximum loan limits to $1 million. We have the authority to give farmers more time to repay their loan if the APP administrator requests it and if the situation warrants it. We are in close contact with our third-party program administrators to monitor the needs of farmers and will evaluate the request for a stay of default. Thank you.
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Madam Speaker, in January, the federal, provincial and territorial ministers for justice and public safety met in Victoria and agreed to examine the impacts of rural crime and how to reduce it through a pan-Canadian working group on rural crime. It has been over a month and we haven't heard a peep from the Minister of Justice. Crime is ravaging rural communities. People don't feel safe in their homes. They're losing faith in the justice system. So when will the Minister announce the details of this pan-Canadian working group?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question. The subject did in fact come up at our last meeting of federal, provincial, territorial ministers of justice, Madam Speaker. I have committed to working with that group moving forward. We've assigned our deputy ministers that task of moving forward, Madam Speaker. And indeed, I have committed to my counterpart in Alberta to visit rural parts of northern Alberta, northern Saskatchewan, in order to see it firsthand. Thank you.
The honourable member for Markham Unionville.
Last Friday, the GTA was shaken by a horrific attack. In Scarborough, a woman was murdered by a stranger with a hammer right on the sidewalk. The police have now charged the attacker with terrorism. Madam Speaker, these types of lone actor terror attacks are common in Europe and elsewhere, but not here. Can the Minister of Public Safety tell the House what the government is doing to make sure this does not happen again?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
I want to offer my sympathies to the family of the victim and friends of the victim. While I cannot comment on a specific case, I can tell you, Madam Speaker, that we trust law enforcement and prosecutors to apply the law to its full extent, and we've invested significant resources in law enforcement and intelligence agencies in this country over the last 4 years, and will continue to do so, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Thérèse de Blainville. Okay. Madam Speaker, all workers pay into EI, so they should be able to access programs that meet their needs. But EI abandons seasonal workers every year, plunging them into weeks of poverty without any income. The National Council of Unemployed Workers was in Ottawa this week to demand that the pilot project for seasonal workers be made permanent and to be improved with an eligibility threshold that's lowered to 420 hours. Will the government meet that demand?
Minister of Employment, Workforce and Development.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We are determined to make this project permanent for seasonal workers. We're aware of the challenges seasonal work entails, and that's why in 2018 we announced $230 million to support seasonal workers. We will continue to support seasonal workers and help them meet the challenges they face during the low season. The Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville. Madam Speaker, the work is seasonal, not the workers' needs. EI should be true insurance for families in the regions of Quebec that depend on seasonal industries. Eligibility criteria should also reflect the reality in those regions. Workers should qualify with 420 hours worked, and benefits should be based on their best 12 weeks of work. That would be an improvement to the pilot project. Will the government make its pilot project permanent and adjust it to people's real situations? The Honourable Minister.
And disabilities.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I said, we are determined to make this pilot project a permanent feature, and very soon, with the support of everyone here in the House, we hope to improve EI in this way to ensure that all seasonal workers get the benefits they need.
For Edmonton West.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Middle Class Prosperity makes over $264,000 a year. Now, despite her riding being within walking distance of Parliament Hill, and despite making over 5 times the average Canadian, she's now asking for $2,000 more for our motor car allowance. Does the minister think a taxpayer-funded car allowance is the reality for middle-class Canadians, or is the reality another thing she cannot define?
The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, I think perhaps we're in a situation where the middle class is a very wide phenomenon. There are lots of factors, whether you live in a big city or not, whether you have a 2-income family or a single-income family. What matters to Canadians is to have well-paid jobs, affordable housing, and secure and dignified retirement. That is why we are dealing with those issues, and we want to make sure that quality of life and affordability are available to the middle class.
It's Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
How do you become a judge in Canada? Well, under this Liberal government, you'd better be a Liberal. Donating sure helps too. This government's use of their political database Liberalist in judicial appointments directly contradicts the PMO line that, quote, all judicial appointments follow our new, open, independent, transparent, and merit-based process. Madam Speaker, they will always put their Liberal friends first. When will this Prime Minister stop rewarding Liberals and start appointing judges based on their merit?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I completely reject the premise of that question. Our government has put into place a process for selecting judges that is transparent and based on merit. Madam Speaker, judges are evaluated by judicial appointment committees across Canada. Those committees work hard. They are completely apolitical, and we then use the recommended and highly recommended candidates from those lists, Madam Speaker, on the basis of merit moving forward as the basis for our judicial appointments. Madam Speaker, we're proud of our record in this matter.
The honourable member for Stevenston, Richmond East.
Madam Speaker, Hong Kong's much-loved pro-democracy media mogul Jimmy Lai Ziying was just arrested for illegal assembly, along with many other very prominent political figures. The promised freedoms of Hong Kongers were being crushed, and this government must take a stand against these violations of human rights and international law. Hong Kong's basic law says its chief executive should be chosen by universal suffrage. Will this government, in keeping up with the basic law and the one country, two system agreement, finally express support for universal suffrage in Hong Kong?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question and his concern about Hong Kong, which is shared equally, I think, by every member in this House. It is an important issue. We are watching these developments closely, as we have been doing for many months. Human rights, freedom of expression, the freedom of the press, and the freedom of parliamentarians, elected politicians, need to be absolutely protected by our government. We are monitoring the situation. We have issued several statements. We are working bilaterally and multilaterally with partners. We continue to recognize the policy that there is one China with two governments and two systems. Thank you.
The honourable member for Scarborough-Guildwood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Benjamin Bawicki is a young graphic artist from Scarborough who's taken a hobby and turned it into his business. His client list includes Raptors' Fred VanVleet, Lakers' Danny Green, and the number of Raptors. The 16-year-old baccalaureate student juggles a heavy study schedule while supporting his family. He's a fantastic example of the talent found in Scarborough. As we come to the end of Black History Month, would the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion update this House on her efforts to support the Black community in Canada?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Diversity.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleague from Scarborough-Guildwood for his work in promoting diversity and inclusion in his community for over 20 years. This past month, Canadians have been celebrating the contributions of Black Canadians to the country that we love. Our government was proud to support Black History Month cultural and community events across Canada, and we've invested $44 million to support Black communities. We've also launched an anti-racism strategy to address anti-Black racism in Canada. You've heard us say it before, Madam Speaker, diversity is our strength. Black Canadians have added so much to our country, and celebrating Black history doesn't end in February, so I encourage everyone to champion Black Canadians like Benjamin throughout the entire year.
The honourable member for Oshawa.
Madam Speaker, manufacturers in Southern Ontario are losing millions of dollars because of this Prime Minister's weak leadership. Montreal Gateway Terminal will be charging fees to manufacturers who can't move their product from ship to rail. Businesses in the GTA that rely on rail to deliver raw materials are having to pay huge fees for a problem this Prime Minister created. Will the Prime Minister compensate businesses that are being held hostage instead of appeasing radical protesters trying to derail cargo trains?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And as an MP representing a manufacturing area like Oshawa, I understand the concerns his constituents are facing. We understand the impacts these blockades are having across the country on small businesses, on manufacturers and farmers. As the Prime Minister stated last week, it's time for the remaining blockades to come down. We're hopeful for a swift resolution on all remaining blockades to ensure that Canadians affected by these blockades can return to work. Thank you.
The honourable member for Essex.
Madam Speaker, respect for First Nations, Inuit and Métis people should underpin all of the discussions in this House. Further, it's also important that all Canadians are equal before the law and enjoy the same rights and freedoms. That being said, Madam Speaker, is it the Prime Minister's intent to also take firearms that are legally owned and bought in good faith away from our law-abiding Indigenous fellow Canadians who require these tools for their hunting and trapping rights?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Crown and Indigenous Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my friend for his comments with respect to of Indigenous rights. And I want to start by ensuring that our government, to assure this House that our government is working to renew Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples, building one based on the affirmation of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership, which is why we will fully implement UNDRIP, and we're working collaboratively through constructive rights recognition tables with real co-development of policy as we speak. We're also working to ensure Canada is fully implementing Indigenous treaties, agreements, and other arrangements. And reconciliation, Madam Speaker, is not only an Indigenous issue, it is a Canadian imperative, one I hope that our...
The honourable member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Madam Speaker, the National Revenue Minister brought in changes to the disability tax credit in 2017. The government said this was to improve accessibility. 3 years later, and constituents from my riding with lifelong mental disabilities are still waiting for access. They are still denied eligibility even after providing legitimate medical documentation. One family was even forced to go to tax court before the government conceded that mental health issues are eligible. When will the government stop discriminating against Canadians with mental health disabilities so they can receive this tax credit?
The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Madam Speaker, our government is taking steps to provide for long-term financial security and independence of people with disabilities. They were abandoned by the Conservatives, but our government restored the Advisory Council on People with Disabilities in 2017. We'd like to thank committee members for their hard work in providing CRA with recommendations to better support people with disabilities. Our government is working on implementing those recommendations. A report was published last year, and that will guide our future decisions, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Member for Moncton Riverview, Dieppe. Thank you, Madam Speaker. When our government was first elected in 2015, we made one of the boldest, most ambitious commitments in Canadian history to cut in half the number of Canadians who live in poverty. I am so proud of the progress we've made so far. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development update the House on the various poverty reduction initiatives this government has taken in New Brunswick and all across Canada? Thank you.
Minister of Families, Children and Social Development.
Madam Speaker, I'm very proud to announce that since 2015, our government has lifted more than 1 million Canadians out of poverty with investments we've made across the country. In fact, in New Brunswick alone, more than half of the children who were living in poverty when we took office have been lifted out of poverty, and 2/3 of the seniors have been lifted out of poverty as well. The results of the Canadian Income Survey are crystal clear. The investments we're making from coast to coast to coast are having tremendous impact at alleviating poverty. We have more work to do, in particular in racialized and Indigenous communities. We will get that work done. We hope the rest of Parliament works with us to achieve these great results.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Esquimalt-Saanich-Sud.
Since 2015, New Democrats have been pressing the Liberal government to create a path to safety in Canada for those whose lives are at risk because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. So far, all we have is a pilot program for just 50 SOGI refugees. Just 50, when Rainbow Refugee Organizations in Canada receive more than 1,000 requests for urgent assistance each month. Given the rising tide of violence against SOGI communities, will the government now recognize the grave threat to SOGI refugees and quickly implement a comprehensive and substantial program for those fleeing violence for who they love or who they are?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank the member opposite for this question. Like countries around the world, Canada has been seeing increasing number of our asylum seekers. With the investment in the budget in 2019, once again, we're leading the way in building an immigration system that is compassionate and respectful of the rules of law. We are making necessary investment to allow the RRB to process 50,000 claims a year so that those who are found to need protection can start their life in Canada sooner and failed claims can be removed. As the UNHCR has said, the investment will allow us to uphold the highest standards in processing asylum claims. Thank you, Mr. President.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to raise the urgent matter of the climate emergency. Under the terms of the Paris Agreement, 2020 is the year in which Canada must improve our climate target. We agreed to do so in 2015. We are now delinquent in that the COP decision in Paris called for the new targets to be tabled by February 9th of this year. We need to table our new target. It needs to meet the IPCC imperative. Can the minister update this House on progress to deliver a Climate Accountability Act and a new target?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for not only her question but her work on this issue. We took a leadership role in 2015 when we signed the Paris Agreement and encouraged other countries to do the same. Through the record investments, plans and programs we've put in place, we've been able to, projections show, bring us to 75% of the way there. We know there's more work to do, which is why we're committing to not only meeting that target but exceeding it and putting in place in the coming months the expert panel that will show this House and all Canadians how we plan on being carbon neutral by 2050. It's something we need to do for all of us and for our children and grandchildren, Madam Speaker.
That's right, we sure do.
And that brings us to the end of question period on a Friday. The Honourable Member for Lethbridge has a point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. During question period, it was acknowledged by the members opposite that they made the claim that under their government that they have encouraged workforce participation among all people in Canada. Madam Speaker, that is not true. According to the library research...
I would just say that that is debate, and I would ask the member to maybe raise it during her debates in the House. Oh, it's a table of report? Okay. Well, I'll listen to the rest of the intervention then.
Madam Speaker, I appreciate that. So according to library research, workforce participation for women has actually dropped as a percentage since reaching its highest mark under the Harper government and the Conservative Party of Canada. I would like to table this document here in this House.
Okay, so I would just say that, you know, the honourable members should be asked, indicating exactly what they are wanting to table and ask for unanimous consent. Does the honourable member have unanimous consent to table the report? No, there's no